Let's speak about the counter lawsuit that was launched, and then the events that led up to that.
Sure. So I represent Jane Doe. She's an American victim, alleged victim of Andrew and Tristan Tate. They sued her around July 2023 to silence her. What's important to note is, Jane Doe is an alleged victim. She provided testimony in the Romanian criminal case, but she did not just walk into the police station and accuse the Tate brothers of any crime. She did not go to the media and tell her story. She didn't post on social media. She didn't just set out to, ruin their public reputation, as they allege. Rather, she was invited to go to Romania by Tristan Tate. He paid for her ticket to go there and invited her to be there. And when she got there, she got scared. She got afraid. She saw things that didn't seem right. She was texting, private text messages, as you would, to family and friends about kind of what she was feeling and thinking. And one of those friends happened to be a United States Marine. And he said, I think what you're describing seems like there could be human trafficking going on. I have to report this. She even said, please don't. I think it would be safer if I sort of just quietly snuck out of the situation. But he felt he had a duty that, as a Marine, it's not really up to him. He has a duty to report a crime when he thinks it's occurring. When he sees an American in trouble, he has to report it. That's what he was trained to do. And he did that. And, it turns out there was already an open investigation of the Tate brothers. There have been multiple reports by different people of abuses by them. And so there was an open investigation. And so ultimately their property was raided. Jane Doe was rescued along with some other women. And she cooperated with Romanian authorities as she had a duty to do as well, right? She did the right thing. And months later, they were released the next day after that raid. Months later, after an intensive investigation by DCOT in Romania, they were arrested again, right? And formally charged with crimes. And that's when they decided to launch this campaign targeted at Jane Doe. They're trying to pin all their problems on her. They sent a cease and desist letter threatening to sue her and her parents for collectively $30 million. And it was insinuated in there that she recanted her statement, that lawsuit wouldn't happen. We believe that's witness intimidation. At the same time, there was all of this private information of hers being posted, lies about her being posted, videos that were really hateful about her and the other woman that was rescued posted. She was receiving a deluge of very scary harassment threats, death threats. And this went on until ultimately they sued her and her parents and the Marine and another victim. And then they sued her in another lawsuit. I mean, she's being sued in 3 different cases by the Tate brothers. And this is all for cooperating with law enforcement. They try to spin this as she's a false accuser. This is the Me Too movement gone wrong, but she didn't say Me Too. She didn't speak up, which she would have a right to do, but she didn't do that. She cooperated with law enforcement, and we believe nobody who does the right thing and cooperates with law enforcement should be sued and harassed to the extent that she has been. Yeah.
So did she make any public statements at all about the Tate brothers, where she actually accused them of the crimes that they've now been charged with, or is this entirely based on suing her because she cooperated with the police and because she was messaging her friend and family that she felt like she was in danger?
That's it. There is no claim that she publicly said anything, because she didn't. They're trying to sue her for private text messages and cooperating with law enforcement.
And now, the Tate camp has put out these messages that supposedly she was sending with another one of the alleged victims. Now, they're very selective in what they show. They claim that it shows that she's openly saying that she's lying and that she's going to get rich off this and she's going to get a Netflix deal and an Oscar.
So in my current court case, we have 2 Americans who lied, the ones who we have the conversations between them saying they're going to get an Oscar for lying to the police.
We are writing a movie ASAP. Yep, for sure. We have to. Writes, I'm dying inside. writes, let's email Netflix.
Maybe you can speak on that and within the actual context that they're sent, what that actually shows.
Yeah, I mean, I invite anyone to read the full text. I mean, they should have been kept private in the Romanian case, but I believe they're out there. I think anyone that reads the full text messages from start to finish can easily see what it is. We tried to point that out multiple times to the court. It's just really, the court said it's too early. Like, you'll get your chance to present evidence. It's too early to try and do that. But it's very clear. The women say multiple times, we're so afraid. These guys are scary. Let's sneak out quietly. They say, play it cool, pretend we're still in love. They'll think we're coming back. You know what? They'll think we're coming back. They won't chase us. Like, let's just get away. And you know, there's some moments of dark humor. These girls were 21 years old. They like get through this extremely stressful situation where these men are in the house. They know they're going to sneak out. They've already bought a ticket to London. They know they're going to sneak out, and they're interacting with these guys. And then they'll get in a room together or get their separate rooms and text, you know, like, you played it so cool, like you deserve an Oscar. I mean, 21-year-old girls in a very scary situation, I mean, making dark humor jokes. But there's never an indication of that they're lying. It's that play it cool, pretend you're still in love, pretend you're happy, and we will sneak out and leave. And then there's expressions of like, you know, anger, like we need to get these guys because this is awful what happened. And, you know, the messages between, you know, Mary Doe and Andrew Tate are so horrific, and the things that were done to her are memorialized there in such a horrific way. And like, Jane Doe knew that, right? She talked to Mary. She saw what she was going through. This woman was in extreme distress. And so they wanted to leave. They were angry. They were scared. It was a super stressful situation. So I don't think there's any way that you could read those in context and think that they were setting them up or lying. You know, there's those selective texts that they repeat over and over again, and that's all they have.
You know, what's clear in the countersuit is she gets to Romania and she gets put in this house with these other girls there. And it's only when she starts speaking with Mary Doe and comparing notes that she actually realizes, okay, this is the same modus operandi that Andrew Tate is using on Mary Doe that Tristan has, that they actually become aware, okay, this is what's happening. This is probably what's happening with the other girls as well. So it's quite powerful to actually see that it's Jane Doe's ability to actually have a conversation and connect with this other girl. And Mary Doe was there about a month, whereas Jane Doe was only there for a week. So it's quite a brief amount of time. The narrative is that Jane Doe was scamming the Tates, and that then she was going to use this to then somehow enrich herself.
You have a woman who is doing this to men, who is extorting them for money, who is using them, and who is putting them in compromising positions.
Can you tell me now, the Tate case is one of the most public cases probably in the world and has been for a while. How many public appearances has Jane Doe made? How much has she actually exploited this situation for her own benefit?
Zero times. And that's the thing, you know, even immediately after, when no one, including her, could have known that this would blow up or how serious the prosecution would end up being. You know, she cooperated with law enforcement. You never know what's going to happen. She didn't go to the media, which this was the height of their fame. This was 2022, height of their fame. Certainly that would have been the time to associate herself or make accusations if that was what this was about. And she did the opposite of that. She went completely into hiding, didn't say a word, didn't go to the media, didn't make anything of this of herself. And there's no evidence she ever asked the Tates for any money. So, I mean, that's just a narrative that they've spun out of thin air, and it's not supported by anything.
You see the Tate brothers completely dominating this narrative and just pushing out utter lies.
The old webcam studio and the current investigation have zero strings in between them. I am accused of helping my friends get big on TikTok.
From the evidence against them,
There's not a single bank transfer. There's not a single piece of evidence for any money.
to even what they're charged with.
You're not actually accused of rape.
Correct.
So I can't even understand what that's like for Jane Doe. Watch these prominent figures like Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, man. This is like...
And then Candace Owens.
Andrew Tate.
And for this narrative to be driven, that's just completely false.
Yeah, it's terrifying and it's distressing and it's so unjust. And, the truth is, they've scared her, right? They've sued her. They started harassing her. They've threatened her. They've sued her. And she's been quiet. And they have shaped the narrative. So she's been quiet. She's tried to do the right thing, right? She doesn't want to disrupt the Romanian prosecution or be accused of disrupting it. She's always kind of maintained that there's a lot more victims that have experienced worse things than she has. It's like this post-case harassment has been worse than, like you said, she was there a short time. But now they have filled the vacuum, right? They have spun the narrative, and it's distressing. So not only has she been quiet to be respectful because she didn't want to make this about herself, but she's being accused of scamming them for fame while they suck all the air out of the room. So, she has a First Amendment right to speak about this. And, if she has the courage to do that, I will stand by her to do that. Because at this point, she has tried to do everything right. We tried to just dismiss this case. She could have countersued the day they filed it. But we didn't want to be disruptive of this Romanian criminal case. We wanted to dismiss the case, move on with her life, try to just do the right thing. And they were relentless, and they sued her again and sued her again. So I'm so honored to represent her. I'm so impressed by her courage that she's willing to not give up and stand up to them. But, finally, this countersuit is her opportunity to tell her side of the story. To speak her truth finally into this situation, even against the most unbelievable opposition and attempts to silence her. They've done everything they possibly could to silence her.
It's coming up to 3 years in April since the Tates were raided, and she, gave her side of the story to the Romanian authorities. So how much of her life has been impacted over the past 3 years, and what's that looked like for her?
It's been devastating. And that's what we allege in the counterclaim. She's been living in hiding since she left. All her fears have come to fruition. The Tate brothers claim that they weren't doing anything nefarious and they aren't sex trafficking anyone, yet they've retaliated against a person who gave witness testimony in the most extreme degree. So the threat of retaliation came true, and she's so terrified. And, it's compounded by the fact that while the Tates are in Romania, they have this unbelievable following of vitriolic men and boys, and that scares her. She feels like any one of these anonymous rabid Tate fans could try and find her and hurt her, and they say they are. They've said, we're trying to find you, and we're going to take you out. We're going to kill you. So, she lives looking over her shoulder every single day. She feels like she can't even share her life with anyone. She's like, they'll Google me and see this. If I get a job, they're going to do a background check and find all this nasty and embarrassing things about me. It's just devastating.
Well, maybe speak a little bit on the actual harassment that she's had after leaving Romania. Because she was even doxxed by the legal representative for the Tates. So maybe you can speak on some of those tactics that they've used.
Yeah, it was just escalating and escalating right after. It was, and then you could see in the Romanian case there was recorded jail calls that was reported on by Rolling Stone and others. That there's recording jail calls of Andrew telling Luke and other people, make videos of these girls, make them cry. They need to be upset. They need to be distressed. And that's what happened. There was these super distressing videos that were lies and posted everywhere. And they received constant nonstop, like their social media was swarmed, their family's social media was swarmed. They had private investigators coming to her parents' house, interviewing every person she's ever known. It was like every day was a new thing. She never knew what was going to happen next. Then attorneys for the Tate brothers post a Google link to documents that have her passport number, her date of birth, her legal name, her parents' legal name, every piece of information that could be a gift to someone for identity theft available there by Tate Brothers' lawyer. So that's just hanging over her head. She doesn't know what's going on with that. At any time, her identity can be stolen because of that. So it's just been so scary.
I'd like to maybe address some of the some of the lies that have been told about her, and then also relating to the Tate case. So the narrative that they spin is that she is someone with a long history of falsely accusing other men of trafficking and similar crimes that she's testified to against the Tates.
So this all began with a girl accusing us of kidnapping her, a girl we have the CCTV to prove was never kidnapped. Isn't it interesting that she's accused 7 other men of kidnapping her in her life?
Is any of that true?
Of course not. And it's not even there in the Tate Brothers complaint. So they'll pick a person, put him in, say, look, she falsely accused this person, tell a story about this person, and there's no allegation of false accusation. They basically just bringing people up that she either dated or had, illicit relationships. Like, she was a very vulnerable teen. Some bad things happened to her. And so these adult men were preying on her. They're basically just bringing up the situations and saying, see, she knew this person. She was involved with this person. There's no allegation. She accused him of something. She threatened to accuse him of anything. None of that, because it's not true. And the most heinous of all is the only other criminal case that's involving her in her life is when she was sexually abused as a 15-year-old at the hands of a 50-something yoga instructor, a man who was convicted, is in prison, and he hurt not only Jane Doe, but another minor. But on top of all that, the public documents, the criminal documents to that, show she didn't even report him to the police. So she didn't even falsely accuse, she didn't even accuse him. Her parents were disturbed why this older man was spending a lot of time with their teenage daughter. They hired a private investigator who captured evidence of him molesting her on camera and presented to the police, indisputable evidence. And then it turns out, like many predators, he had predated on another child. He was a serial sexual predator, and there was 2 minor victims, and he's convicted. She was supposed to be protected in that case. She was a child. That was supposed to be renamed anonymous. The guarantees of, a victim in that case is that you don't have to live with this the rest of your life. And yet the Tate brothers put it in a complaint and heinously allege she is the predator in that situation. I don't even know how they could possibly have done something like that. And I don't know why. I think people are outraged by it, to be honest. But I think anyone who read that would be outraged. I hope they would, because it's just sick.
Yeah, I want to just address, because Candace Owens did an episode which was dedicated entirely to attempting to discredit Jane Doe. And all of her foundation for the evidence for that entire episode was based on the Tate's claim against Jane Doe.
I'll tell you who she is, according to the Tate brothers, who is suing her in Palm Beach County, Florida. According to them.
And in this episode, she beat the name of Jail John, person who's convicted of molesting 2 children, including Jane Doe.
Throughout this episode, by the way, you're going to hear some beeps when I'm discussing this case. If I accidentally say his name, we intend to just beep it out. Again, just to protect the fact that she was, in fact, a minor at the time of these accusations.
Yet she broadcast your client's name over 100 times. Is there any way that you can reasonably justify that?
I really can't. And I think what was misleading, too, about that is that she said it was a deep dive into the victims. Yet, as you said, she just was reading from the complaint, and she was even using deductive reasoning that where are the allegations she actually accused these men? Like, they just bring up men and say, look, she's accused a bunch of men, here's the men, with no evidence she falsely accused them. Another sick example is a man she dated died by suicide.
I have seen people online circulating saying that this woman caused a man to commit suicide.
Why they're doing this to that man's family, I also will never understand. But this man had mental health issues. Jane Doe did not cause his suicide, nor is there even an accusation in their own complaint that she accused him of any crime. They don't even say she accused him of any crime. In fact, they try to say, oh, she played with his heart. And that's why he killed himself, which is hateful. And again, like, I don't know how you justify that. I don't know why Candace Owens would do that. And it doesn't make any sense, except that you were just trying to support the Tate brothers' narrative, not based on facts, not even their side of the story, which has supportive evidence, just their narrative, which is unsupported.
The other thing is that the entire case against them in Romania is based solely on her testimony.
The reason for this case boils down to one 21-year-old girl making an allegation.
And that she's the only victim, as she claims.
Yeah, that's really important, and I'm glad you raised that. No, of course, that's not true. She provided some witness testimony about what she witnessed, but there's been many women who've given in-depth testimony against the Tate brothers about the abuse they experienced, sometimes over the course of years. Several women have given long video interviews, provided copy of their text message of their phones. There's 7 victims in the first case against Andrew and Tristan Tate that Jane Doe is a part of. Mary Doe, obviously, also gave testimony against them. Of course, they try to say, well, she's just accomplice. Of course, anybody who gives testimony against them, they have some spin. But she gave damning testimony against them. And then 3 other women, and I might be getting my math wrong now, 3 other women gave testimony against them. No, 2 other women did. And then 2 obviously are in the Tate's camp. They claim they're not victims, yet DCOT has listed them as victims.
Poți să mă treci pe mine ca și victimă dacă eu n-am spus că sunt o victimă.
Although that's not unusual. Trafficking victims often don't identify as victims. They're in the thrall of the trafficker and they'll stand by him. But even if you remove them from the case, there would still be 4 victims in that case. Then there's a second investigation, which has over 34 women. Again, I think I've heard the Tates try to say 30 of those women are on my side. I don't think that's true. I've seen testimony from dozens of women against them, including a very young minor victim who the DCOT alleges Andrew tried to pay off, but then didn't even pay her the full amount he promised. And she was very young. I think she was 15 years old when she was sexually abused by Andrew Tate. So there's many, many, many women involved. And Jane Doe is like this, probably, not to diminish, probably the smallest part of this, considering all of the women that have been abused over the years and who are participating.
It's quite incredible. I mean, because she was there for under a week, and she didn't actually start getting involved with the webcam activity because it was under a week that she actually, was savvy to what was going on. But I think it's quite important. It's, although everything's not based entirely on what happened to her, I mean, she is a catalyst for them getting raided, which then launched this investigation. And it seems to me that it really made Romania take it seriously because she was an American victim and her family contacted the embassy.
I mean, I don't know if that's true. Like I said, there was an open investigation before, and it was a U.S. Marine who called. I mean, maybe that had significance. Maybe it did have significance that she was an American victim. That would be a good thing, I think. But it kind of goes back to your point. I mean, if this was all for her fame and fortune, wouldn't her story be a little more elaborate? I mean, she doesn't even allege that she was trafficked on webcam. She never has. She didn't to Romania. She didn't to anyone. She never said they forced me to do webcam. She didn't allege, some violent. I mean, this is an elaborate plot, but her allegations are, I'm witnessing this, I'm seeing this, I think this might be happening.
Yeah, that's the thing with that Candace Owens episode that's really striking to me, is that she runs with the narrative that the Tate spin, where she says that this whole thing was a ploy from Jane Doe. to get rich and famous and to scam the Tates for her own benefit.
And they have now a scheme that they're just going to defraud the Tate brothers. And then they're going to enjoy their glamorous European lifestyle.
And she claims that, Jane Doe was weaving this kind of elaborate plan. And then it was the Marine that ruined this by contacting the embassy. And that was never meant to happen.
It just completely got out of control. She could not believe that he actually called the U.S. Embassy when she just kind of lightly said that she was being human sex trafficked. This situation obviously got out of her control because she didn't think that he would actually do it.
Jane Doe hasn't given one public appearance. She hasn't gone on Oprah. She's not across all these podcasts. She hasn't been interviewed by Tucker Carlson. She's been pretty much underground, has no social media presence, and is in no way exploiting this situation. In fact, all her fears were that she didn't want her family to get involved in contacting the embassy because of what would happen. That is exactly what's happened, is that she's been harassed and bullied.
And on top of that, in her statement to Romanian authorities, she had the opportunity to be a civil party, which would be our equivalent of restitution, right? If you're a crime victim and the perpetrator is convicted and the government seizes assets, then they can give a restitution to the victims to try to make them whole, right? It's very common. She declined to be a part of that. Specifically in her statement, that was her right to do. She could have done that, she should do that as a victim, but she declined to get any restitution and specifically said, because I don't want it to be said I did this for money. I'm just trying to do the right thing. Who would do that? If this is all about making money, she's declining some money she had a right to have potentially as a victim. It doesn't add up at all. And then the Tate brothers themselves have said they've made more money off the spectacle of this whole thing, of, having content, having outrageous, clickbaity content that they're being unjustly persecuted in this foreign country of Romania. That sounds very, and in America, of course, Romania sounds Eastern Europe. Where is that? They get to make this whole tale about their political refugees, and they've made more money than ever, while no one even knows who Jane Doe is, or that there even is a Jane Doe. I think most people don't even know there is an American victim. And then if they do, they have the heinous things the Tate brothers have said about her. And they think she's the only one, to your point, even though there's 34 plus victims.
Yeah, well, they always say there's no victims, there's no victims.
Have you seen a single video of a single woman accusing me of anything? Show me a picture, show me a video. Who's even a victim? There's nobody.
And then they'll say the victims that there are all testifying on our behalf.
You said earlier, who are these women? Well, there are 7 named in the indictment.
Yeah, have you seen the videos of them on the internet saying we're not victims? They made us be victims.
And as you said, there are 2 that have made public statements saying that they're not victims.
You were actually a human sex trafficking victim if you were actually being held against your will. And the police swoop in and they arrest your captor and he is now in prison. You now have the means to leave. Rather, these women are doubling, tripling, and quadrupling down to say that Andrew and Tristan never imprisoned them.
You have these 2 women who are claiming we're not victims, but it's important to point out that they're still under the Tate's control. And in fact, they're saying that while they have tattoos saying to the effect Tate property and Tate owned.
Tatuajul ăsta care scrie Tate Girl.
Yeah, it happens quite a lot disturbingly in human trafficking cases.
Yeah.
Where the trafficker will brand their victims as a way to dehumanize them.
Cobra Tate over everything. No one's driving my cars but me. It's like my women. Put my name on them. For life. Boom. Done.
Well, I can't speak to the state of mind of those individual women. I don't know what they really believe, what they've experienced. I can say that it is very common in human trafficking for victims of human trafficking to not believe they're victims at first, to believe that they're in love with their trafficker. He really loves me. You've got this all wrong. That's very common. So it's not unusual for prosecutors to, in America, to still treat those victims as victims, even if they're not self-identifying as victims. That's very common. That's routine. The Tate brothers try to spin that as being this anomaly and this example of how their case is so unusual. It's very usual. It's very common.
Also, there's an element of blackmailing as well, right? I mean, these women have worked for them for years, and they've made pornography and things like that. So, I mean, that's another tactic that the Tates have used in the past, where they'll actually put out pornography that these people have made when they attempt to leave.
Again, I can't speak to those two women specifically. I mean, there is a victim in the case that has alleged that, not those two women, a different victim, not my client, not Mary Doe, another victim who has alleged that when she tried to leave, they posted pornographic pictures of her on her Facebook, and her family saw and all these things. So that's certainly something someone has alleged before. And I mean, I can talk generally about, their tactics and the Loverboy method if you want. Yeah.
Let's talk about that, because I think that's a big one, and a lot of people have framed their case. Even Candace Owens and even Tucker Carlson have framed it in that what they're charged with, the Loverboy method, is not human trafficking, and that this is some brand new definition that's been created, and that human trafficking is actually like the movie Taken. And what the Tates did does not fit that definition and should not be categorized as human trafficking.
I mean, that's just ignorance of what human trafficking is. The Loverboy method, specifically that phrase Loverboy method, is in academic research. You could find many papers about it. In America, we often call it Romeo pimping. That's what people who work in the anti-trafficking movement would refer to it. Law enforcement regularly refers to it as Romeo pimping. And it is the most common form of human trafficking, which is this human trafficking via a false relationship, a false romantic relationship. Of course, there's other types. There's guerrilla pimping, which is another phrase that would be like a very violent trafficker who is like physically beating these women constantly. That's called guerrilla pimping. Okay. But the Romeo pimp, Loverboy method, anyone in the trafficking space knows exactly what that is. Anyone in law enforcement who investigates these crimes know exactly what that is. It's a most common form of trafficking. And the other thing to point out is things like Taken do happen. But that is only one kind of trafficking. And again, it's not the most common kind. In the US, human trafficking is, by definition, when causing someone to engage in commercial sex acts. So webcam pornography for profit would be commercial sex acts, causing them to engage in that via force, fraud, or coercion, or if they're a minor. You don't have to prove, if it's a minor doing it, it's trafficking. So force, fraud, or coercion. Okay, everyone understands the force part. Okay, yeah, that's more clear. You're physically forcing someone. Of course, that's human trafficking, but there's the fraud and the coercion piece. And that's what Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson are just leaving out or intentionally ignoring when they are a key element of human trafficking and the most common. So fraud would be causing someone to engage in commercial sex act via fraud, via lies. So, I mean, Andrew and Tristan Tate have discussed publicly lying about the terms that they would manage someone on OnlyFans, telling the women it's going to be 50-50 when it's really going to be 40-60 or 30-80 or less than that. That would be causing them to engage in commercial sex via fraud. That would meet the definition of sex trafficking. And then coercion is harder to define. In different jurisdictions is defined differently. In the federal statute, there's some examples like withholding drugs, causing someone to get hooked on drugs and then holding the drugs and being the only means of using drugs is a common way of coercing somebody, threatening to turn them into law enforcement because maybe, like you said, blackmail, they've committed crimes or they're illegal immigrants. That's a common way. Taking documents, controlling documents, threatening to harm their family or threatening to harm them is coercion. And in Florida, it goes into more detail of, reputational harm, threatening reputational harm, other things like that. So there's a lot of ways to coerce someone. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're causing someone to do something against their will, you're overcoming their will, or you're misleading them, then that can be sex trafficking. I mean, that's the most common form of sex trafficking.
If you were going to attempt to educate people, especially women, but even friends and family as well, what would be some of the early signs or those clear indicators that the Loverboy method is being used?
So isolation, you can no longer get a hold of someone. They're no longer available. They're no longer spending time with people they used to spend time with. They're no longer sharing anything about their life. And we see the Tate brothers talk about to their war room buddies about isolating the women they control, cut off. She shouldn't have any other influences.
If she has like a really strong social circle and she really insists on seeing them, they're going to have a big influence over her. And it is in your best interest to get her away from that social circle. All these things tie into isolating her and taking her away from the outside influences. Every outside influence is your enemy. All of them.
Because human trafficking, especially the Loverboy method, is a lot like a cult. Nobody has any trouble understanding that people in cults, grown adults, right? We all know we're not like Jonestown. What was going on there? We get it. We know these are grown adults voluntarily hurting themselves, doing things against their own best interests, in suffering because they've been brainwashed. They have now attached a deep meaning to this person, to this belief, and they're isolated from the rest of the world. They don't have other influences to maybe shake them out of it, test the beliefs, right? Give them any other perspective. That is the same thing as what happens in these trafficking circles.
If you're not fucking the girl, she is fucking someone else. And that other person she's fucking is going to have the control over her mind as opposed to you. And if he controls her mind and you don't control her mind, once she starts to pick it up a bit after a few weeks, a few months, whatever, and realizes how to make money on her own, she's going to run off. She's going to leave.
The women are isolated from outside influences. They're surrounded by other women in the same situation, reinforcing what the Tate brothers are saying, reinforcing these beliefs. There's this high emotional attachment where they're showered with love and affection. There's this sexual relationship.
You're going to reward them for their good work with attention. So when they work hard and they do good, like I said, you don't want a girl who's in it for the money. You want a girl who's in it because she loves you. So when they're working hard, you have to please them. You have to please them with attention. The easiest way to give a girl attention is to fuck them.
And then if they step out of line, there's this abandonment. There's this, emotional fight, this, putting them down, breaking them down, hitting all those insecurities. And then they also have nowhere to go, right? They're isolated from their community. It feels like all they have in their life is this relationship. And now it's at risk. So I need to please again. I need to get in the good graces. And so it's that over and over and over again, creating these bonds, these deep bonds through trauma, through this emotional up and down, this manipulation. It's not normal for people to live and sleep with the person that they're working for. That's a red flag. If you are just a webcam model of your own choice, why are you living in a house with other webcam models? You're all dating the manager of the webcam business. That's not healthy or normal. Those would be red flags as well.
Career progression. All the shit they do in normal jobs to keep the fucking person slaving away. Eventually you're going to be here. We're going to own this. You're going to make this much. Blah, blah, blah. But the only way we can do that is if we go have all these threesomes with all these girls, because these girls have to work for us, and they're not going to work if they don't love me, because they're going to run off. So the only way me and you as a team are going to be rich people is if we go get a bunch of girls to suck my dick together.
Yeah, I think there's an idea that the alleged victims and the women that worked for Andrew Tate were, promiscuous women with a history of pornography. For many of them, the women had no history of pornography, and even one of the ones who's testifying publicly that they're not victims.
I was never a victim, and I've said that day one.
Actually was very explicit early on, saying that she'd never even sent a photo to anyone of herself in lingerie, let alone do webcamming, and then cut to years later, and there she is in this house, being a full-time webcam model, that Jane Doe then meets.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a really important point. I mean, one, who cares if they are promiscuous women? Does that mean you can lie to them and, trick them into doing pornography and giving you all the money? No. There's no such thing as a perfect victim. Even if a victim has a lot of problems, they could still be a victim of this crime. So I just want to say that. But it is true that Andrew Tate has talked about, and Tristan, that they actually like to target particularly innocent women who don't have a lot of experience, who haven't done this stuff before.
By taking girls who didn't know how to be effective on webcam, girls who had never done webcam before, girls who didn't have the equipment, didn't have the know-how, didn't have the will, didn't have the premises, didn't have the ability to make money with this exchange.
Because they're very naive to it, number one. They're easier to trick because they don't expect that they don't even anticipate that this person would be trying to pimp them out. And because they feel much more invested. So if the Tate, and Andrew Tate specifically says this in his PhD class, women who are, innocent and religious, if you can get them to do something against their normal rules, then they'll feel so invested in the relationship that they'll keep doing more things because they don't want to think of themselves as a slut. They don't want to think, well, I violated my principles for nothing. I want it to mean something. So that's a particularly sick strategy that he's specifically talked about, that he targets women with morals, because if he can get them to violate their morals, then he'll be able to control them even more. And he's even said something to the effect of, make yourself like God, make yourself their whole world, so it'll be like taking God from a Christian. And that victim you're referring to, Andrew Tate posted text messages of himself grooming her and talks about how, she's so religious, and he likes that because once he gets her to basically violate her morals as a Christian, then he will be all that matters to her. He will basically he will supplant God and her religion. And unfortunately, it's pretty obvious that is how she feels about him, that she will do anything for him. And that's alarming. That's scary. I think, to your point of, it's a red flag at the very least. I can't speak to exactly her state of mind, but it's frightening that someone would say, she specifically said, this is against my religion, this is against my beliefs to do this kind of pornography. And now she's a full-time pornography actress.
I don't know how many cases there are like this with the Tate brothers, where, not only were they, allegedly trafficking women, but they were also teaching courses on how to use those very same methods for other men to traffic women, but also had a membership community where they would compare notes and give advice and bond over the trafficking of women. What is that like to, for what you do, to see that and to see, the kind of influence that Andrew Tate has over young men?
Well, I think there's two parts to your question. One, what is it like for me and the work I do to see him just engaging in that sort of teaching behavior and communal behavior? That's actually very common. So that's not surprising to me. Traffickers often teach each other and compare notes. There's multiple books written by traffickers. And, Andrew and Tristan regularly cite To Pimp and Ken.
There's a saying I like. It's from a street pimp called Pimpin' Ken.
Have you ever read the book by Pimpin' Ken? Have you ever read 48 Laws of the Game? Have you ever read that book? You should read it. It's by Pimpin' Ken. Pimpin' Ken, a hoe without instruction is headed for self-destruction.
Who has been identified as somebody who was trafficking and teaching trafficking methods. So again, they're very brazen. So that brings to the second point of the influence on young men. It's really upsetting because young men do need good role models. We see that our young men today are in distress. And so for Andrew Tate to be the one capturing that, again, vulnerable audience, it disturbs me. It disturbs me. And I look forward to good male role models pushing him out and being serving those men better, especially because Andrew Tate has bragged about exploiting vulnerable men. He's literally laughed about how he's got men selling their houses.
I had these guys selling their houses, life savings, loans, all of it to me. Give me it all.
Because they think they're in love with a woman and they're talking to me.
And they were talking to fucking ice cold hustlers. We were taking their money, all of it.
You saw these kind of these guys, I don't even know who they are, these podcast guys, being like, wow, I mean, do you feel bad about that? And he goes, F no, why would I feel bad?
You don't feel bad at all.
Why the fuck would I care?
I mean, that's how he feels about even his own following. To me, it appears like Andrew Tate will exploit any vulnerable person to his end, whether that be men or women. So I think it's a mistake that people think of him as a hero of men, because he's exploited men and looks like even minor boys more than any other public figure I could possibly think of. So he's just disqualified from being, people try to be like, well, he does good things. Like, I don't believe so. Don't believe he's doing anything good for young men. And I think there's plenty of male role models who are inspiring and have inspiring messages to share. We don't need Andrew Tate. We don't need Tristan Tate. There's better men out there, and when they go away, those men will be the influencers, and they'll be better. The other thing I just wanted to mention about them teaching these methods and being really public and describing them is it's so outrageous that he would sue Jane Doe for defamation, for describing the very things he's bragged about doing. I mean, I think that's what's so outrageous too, and people need to realize. He is suing Jane Doe for literally describing him doing things he has bragged about doing.
So that is the recruitment structure, and that is extremely important. I hope you understand why you have to have sex with a girl, otherwise she is going to leave. What you don't want to do is get a bunch of girls, teach them how to make money from home, and then let them leave you and run off and make money for themselves.
He made money after bragging about lying to women and convincing them to do webcam and give all the money to him. She said something to the effect of, it looks like he's lying to women and getting them to do webcam and giving them all the money, and he sued her for defamation. Like, that should outrage everyone.
I can't even imagine what it would have been like for Jane Doe to have later seen all of these videos of him teaching exactly the. Have you ever been involved in a case or seen an example where there's this level of self-snitching and publicly available footage of a human trafficker laying out exactly their MO in human trafficking?
I mean, not for an individual. I had a similar experience with Pornhub, feeling like a lot of the very extreme and violent and heinous things on that website are out in the open, and people just seem to blind to it for a very long time. It felt similar, like this site is publicly available. These are the titles. These are the reports. This says removed by Nick Mick. That means a child was there, and people were sort of just not getting it. So that's not quite the same as an individual doing such a good job of confessing their crimes, but I had a similar experience. So I also have a hope that that people can get the truth, right? We need to get the truth out there, and the people can understand it. It takes a lot of advocacy, but it is possible for people to understand the truth of situations like these.
I'd just like to get your comment, because on just in the past few days, there's been reporting about the Trump administration through someone in their administration having conversations with Romanian minister about the Tate case. So I just like to get your comment on those reports and potentially the Trump administration getting involved with the Tate's case in Romania.
I don't really know what, from reading the different reports, I don't know what has happened or not happened. I don't know that the Trump administration has gotten involved. I hope they haven't. And to me, it's not clear that they have. But what I think is going on, the most important thing that I think people need to realize is the Tates have controlled a narrative. They've sold a narrative. They are definitely trying to appeal to the president that they are political, they're being targeted for political prosecution. And so all I want the president to know and everyone to know is there's another side of the story that the Tates have suppressed, which is that there's an American victim involved. There's an American U.S. Marine. The Tate brothers have sued both of them for their speech and tried to silence them. So I think the truth is people are very confused about this case. They're very confused. And the Tate brothers have spun a elaborate narrative. So I think the most important thing is for people to understand the truth of this. There's many victims. There's credible evidence of minor victims. And there's other Americans that are involved in this and who are actively being harassed and intimidated by the Tate brothers.
I just like, with this countersuit and the experiences of Jane Doe over the past few years, and being sued for simply giving her account to the Romanian police, and private messages with family. What kind of reform or laws do you think should be in place to better protect these victims?
Yeah, I think, this has made me realize that, I'm a litigator and a civil litigator by practice. I'm usually the one suing people. So generally, I think suing people can be a really great way to get justice, because the government can't go around, getting justice for everyone. That's not really possible or even the right thing. I think being able to sue people allows you to get justice in a different way. But clearly that can be abused. I never really appreciated how badly that can be abused. So, I think in the anti-SLAPP arena, that's the acronym we use for strategic litigation against public participation. I think that's exactly what's happening here. And those laws in Florida aren't very strong. I'd like to see stronger anti-SLAPP laws, and ones that particularly identify human trafficking victims. If somebody is a human trafficking victim in an active criminal investigation, that perpetrator should not be able to sue her while that prosecution or investigation is ongoing. At the very least, they're going to have to wait until that is over, because of course that's going to deter that victim from participating in that criminal prosecution. So that's what I would like to see happen.
And just quickly, what is the status of the original lawsuit against your case from the Tates? Where is that at? Because I think there's a lot of misinformation surrounding that.
Yeah, so we're in the discovery stage, right? We answered, we countersued. So they'll get a chance. It's all one case. Our response to their case was to countersue them. So, technically we're in discovery too, but they'll get a chance to try and dismiss our claims, or they could just answer them, or they could try to dismiss them or strike them or do different things to get rid of them. So we'll have to litigate that and do discovery. I am concerned about how this lawsuit potentially, could interfere with the criminal case in Romania. And I'm very sensitive to that, and always trying to seek ways to mitigate that. So, we'll have to navigate that and see if there's a way to mitigate that to the best that we can.
And just the last one, I have to ask, because I just remember that you were there in Romania, and the point of harassment against the alleged victims got so bad that you did a press conference along with Matt Jury, who's representing 4 of Tate's alleged UK victims in a civil suit.
The message the survivors have asked me to communicate today is, we will not be bullied into silence.
And along with the Romanian prosecution. Can you just tell me about that? Because that's one of the wildest things I've seen. That it got that bad, the harassment towards the victims, that you had to do that.
They're terrified. They've been threatened. They've had people come visit their place of work, come to their homes. People are harassing them and attacking them and threatening them. And
then what actually happened at that press conference too?
Yeah, that was one of the strangest things that's ever happened in my life. There's complications that I believe the Tate brothers exploit with the fact that Romania's system is very different than the US, and there's this language barrier. So it's very difficult to, I couldn't just call up the Romanian prosecutor and say, hey, this is happening to my client. That was difficult to navigate. And, Jane Doe was assigned a Romanian lawyer, pro bono lawyer. I had trouble trying to talk to that person. She doesn't know who I am. She doesn't necessarily trust me. So that was really difficult. And I just felt I had to advocate for my client, who was, the Tate brothers had this benefit of going to court every day in Romania and acting like they were abiding by the judicial control. We're not contacting this woman. Meanwhile, in America, everybody knows they're tweeting about her constantly, slandering her, suing her, which I would argue is contacting her and violating that. So, you know, and the British victims felt in a similar situation. So, you know, we went to Romania to try and just get that information to the Romanian public, to the people. We felt nobody understands the Tate brothers are doing this, suing these victims and also lying about this case.
Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate and their lawyers in America have decided to sue our clients who are victims of human trafficking and sexual abuse. The Tates are now trying to take advantage of the American courts to undermine their criminal prosecution in Romania. The judge found, based on the evidence we provided, taken from the Tates' own Twitter, that the women and their families' safety is at risk. They are in real physical danger.
They were denigrating the Romanian criminal system and the Romanian government, the country. I mean, they're saying they weren't charged with anything. It's a super corrupt place and they weren't even charged with a crime when they were. And if they're lying about being charged with a crime, which every single one of you in Romania know they are, what else are they lying about? So yeah, I mean, we felt like we had to do that. And then in a bizarre turn of events, the Tate brothers, you know, suggested to media they were going to appear. Then they said, no, we're not. And then their lawyer comes and starts asking questions, but he doesn't disclose he's their lawyer. He acts like he's a member of the media or the press, I don't know, or the public. And then, you know, we finish saying what we want to say and we get down and he goes up and sits at our table and holds his own press conference. I mean, wild. I don't see how that's
even their like PR person was there as well, who had like this weird disguise.
She just had a nose job and had like surgery tape from, and then she was vaping the whole time in the room. It was strange.
But somehow it completely fit the Tate brand. that you would do a press conference about them using this harassment techniques, and then they would suddenly just turn up and take over the show. It was crazy to watch. I can't even imagine what it would have been like to have been there.
It was hard to like understand. We were just, where are we? What are we living? Also, like, I don't know how that served the Tate brothers, honestly. So it was very strange. To me, it felt like it was an intimidation technique again. I mean, you guys are trying to silence them. They do a press conference, you're trying to interrupt it, disrupt it, and then trump it with your own. And again, you know, like if you're constantly silencing us, then, you know, why? If everything's a lie, there's no victims, why are you trying to silence them? Let them say what they need to say.